Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our today's Leads meeting. Today is 10th March 2024. And we got a very exciting topic from a very experienced person. And the topic is a mission to establish a five-pillar governance. ඒ කියන්නේ five-pillar government එකක වැදගත්කම ගැන තමයි අද මේ ලස්සිල් ඩිසිල්ව කතා කරන්න යන්නේ. And why and what? ඒ දෙක තමයි වැදගත්ම දේ. Why five pillar governance එකක් ලංකාවට අවශ්‍ය why? And මේ five pillar කියන්නේ මොකක්ද කියන එක. ඒ කියන්නේ what කියන එක තමයි ඕනේ. How to get there කියන එක අපි ඔක්කොටම කතා කරන්න පුළුවන් අද මීටින් එකේ අන්තිමට. හැබැයි මේක very complex subject area එකක් නිසා අපි බොහොම step එකෙන් step එකට තමයි යන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. So I think so before we proceed, I have a little bit of couple of slides to talk about something very important. Lankaවේ දැනට democracy is at stake. Very serious situation is there. And in relation to this, I want to talk a little bit about today about abstention. මේ abstention කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? දැන් මේකේ ඒ කියන්නේ does not go to vote. ඒ කියන්නේ ඡන්දයක් ජෙනරල් ඡන්දයක් තියෙනකොට ඡන්දෙට යන්නේ ඡන්දෙ දෙන්නේ නැහැ. Or in a parliamentary procedure, you are a commission member or a parliamentary member, you don't cast your ballot. So මේ abstention කියන එක පොඩ්ඩක් අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ. මොකද හේතුව it's a very serious business. ඔක්කොම හිතන් ඉඳන්නේ මේ කට්ටිය මේකට කියන්න කැමති නැති නිසා එහෙම ඉන්නවා කියලා, but එහෙම නෙමෙයි. It's a very complicated and a tricky business. So මම මේක කියන්න හදන්නේ මොකද දැනට මම දැනෙන තරමට සමහර අය කියන විදිහට also there's lot of people in Sri Lanka do not want to cast their vote this time because they are so frustrated with what has happened in the politics, so they don't want to vote. But that is a very serious problem, and that's why I'm trying to explain about this abstention. Now, for example, then Sri Lanka presidential election එකක් එනවා කියලා තියෙනවා in 2024. Now there are 10 in here. 10 could be 10 members in a commission, like the, say, for example, Online Safety Act, we remember that. Or 10 could be 10 million people who are voting in Sri Lanka. Okay. So it could be any of this. Now, if you take this, like take the presidential election or commission, 4 members will say yes. Now, out of the 10, if 4 members say yes, දැන් 4 දෙනෙක් yes කිව්වට පාස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද ඒක majority එකක් නෙවෙයිනේ. So that is what. දැන් general election එකක් ගත්තොත් දැන් මේකේ yes කියන අය තමයි yes, no අය no ඉන්නවා. එතකොට A කියලා දාලා තියෙන්නේ abstain, ඒක මෙතන නැහැ. B කියලා දාලා තියෙන්නේ vote කියන්නේ මේ ඡන්දයක් එක්කෝ incentive එකක් දීලා ගන්නවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් intimidate කරලා නවත්තනවා, ඒ වගේ දෙයක්. So ඒක මම පොඩ්ඩක් explain කරන්න යනකොට. දැන් එතකොට මේ මොකක් හරි දැන් online safety කියලා කියමු. එහෙම නැත්නම් general election එකේ 140ක් 4 දෙනෙක් ඡන්දේ yes කියලා දෙනවා. ඒ වුණාට ඒක මදි දිනා ගන්න. එතකොට කරන්නේ දැන් දෙන්නෙක් දැන් ලංකාවේ general election එකක් ගත්තොත් සාමාන්‍ය 80ක් විතර තමයි එන්නේ. එතකොට ආවහම 120ක් abstain. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ vote ඡන්ද දාන්න ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. එතකොට දැන් මෙතන roughly මෙතන 150ක් විතර තියෙනවා. මේ 4 දෙනෙක් 140ක් ඡන්ද තියුණාට දෙන්නෙක් ආපු නැති නිසා මේක 150ක් වෙනවා. එතකොට තාම win එකක් නැහැ. ඒ වුණාට equal position එකක් තියෙනවා. now මේ වගේ තත්ත්වයක් තියෙනකොට සමහර අය ගොඩක් tricks apply කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක තමයි මම මේ abstain කියන එකෙන් කරන්න හදන්නේ. දැන් එතකොට මේගොල්ලොන් දැන් එතකොට දැන් මෙතන ගත්තොතින් 10 million people ඉන්නවනම් 1 million අයගේ ඡන්දේ ගත්තොත් ඒ කියන්නේ මෙහෙම දැන් සමහර කැන්ඩිඩේට්ස් මේ විදිහට කතා කරලක් තියෙනවා. 1 million families වලට ගිහිල්ලා කියනවා ඕගොල්ලෝ ඡන්දේ දාන්න යන්න එපා. ඡන්දේ දාන්න යන්න එපා. අපි රුපියල් 2000 දෙන්නම් එක්කෙනෙකුට. එක ඡන්දයකට 2000 දෙනවා කියමුකෝ. පොඩි ගාණක් නෙච්ච ලොකු ගාණක් නෙවෙයි මේ කරප්ට් කට්ටියට. එතකොට එහෙම දීලා එක ඡන්දයක් ඇබ්ස්ටේන් වුණා. දැන් කොමිෂන් එකක් ගත්තොත් ඉතින් ඒකේ ඉන්න 10 දෙනාගේ එක ඡන්දයක් ඇබ්ස්ටේන් වුණොත් මේ 4 දෙනාගේ ඡන්දය 157කට වැඩි වෙනවා. එතකොට ඒ කියන්නේ මේ දැනට පැරදිලා හිටපු ලොට් එක. ඒ කියන්නේ ඡන්දේ නොදී නිසා මේ එකක් මාරු කරලා පුළුවන් 50% ඡන්ද අරගෙන 57 අරගෙන විනර් වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. එතකොට මේක බලන්න තව කොච්චර සීරියස් වෙනවද කියලා මේ කමිෂන්ස් ගැන බලනකොට. දැන් එතකොට එකක් නෙමෙයි අපි දෙකක් කොහොම හරි ගන්නවා. දෙකක් ගන්නවා එක්කෝ සල්ලි දීලා ගන්නවා එක්කෝ ඉන්සෙන්ටිව් එකක් මාක් හරි දීලා ගන්නවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඉන්ටිමිඩේට් කරනවා. දැන් ඡන්දය පොලකට ගිහිල්ලා ඡන්දේ කට්ටියට කියනවා මේක ආවතින් වෙඩි තියනවා කියලා. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඡන්දෙක තියෙන ගිහිල්ලා පෙට්ටි ටික ඔක්කොම විනාශ කරනවා. ඒ වගේ මොකක් හරි කරනවා. මොකක් හරි කරන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද හරි ස්පෙસિෆිකලි කරන්න පුළුවන් මේක. මොකද ඡන්ද ස්ථානවල මේ ඡන්ද පොඩක් එක එක පැත්තකට යන විදිය බලලා ඉවරලා කරන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක්. එහෙම කරොත් දෙන්නෙකුට ඒ කියන්නේ දෙන්නෙකුට කියන්නේ 120කට කරොත් මේ හතර දෙනාගේ ඡන්දේ 66ක් වෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ 2/3 majority ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඇත්තටම 140ක් තියුණු. ඉතින් එතකොට ඡන්දේ නොදී හිටියාම ඇබ්ස්ටේන් වුණාම හරි. එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ පොඩි ප්‍රමාණයක මේ බයස් එකට ගියොත් ඒ කියන්නේ තමන්ගේ ඡන්දේ කවුරු හරි ගත්තොත් ඒ කියන්නේ අඩුවානේ මේ ගත්තෝ කියන්නේ ඡන්දේ ගිහිල්ලා දාන්න නෙමෙයි. නොදන්න ඡන්දෙට නොදී ඉන්න එකට සල්ලි දීලාත් කරත් ඇති. එහෙම කරොත් අපිට වෙන වැඩේ මේ පේනවා. මේක වෙලා තියෙනවා ගොඩක් සැරයක්. ඒක නිසා තමයි මම මේ කියන්නේ. It is essential you vote. If no choice, give it to the most unknown person. That is better than abstain. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා මේ ඡන්දෙදී හැමෝම කොහොම හරි ගිහලා ඡන්දේ දාන්න ඕනේ. දාලා Taman කැමති කෙනෙක් ඇත්තේ නැත්නම් කැමති නැති එහෙම නැත්නම් දන්නේම නැති අපේක්ෂකයට ඡන්දේ දැම්මත් ඒක වැදගත් නොදී ඉන්නවට වැඩියි. So ඉතින් මෙහෙම කරොත් තමයි අපිට ඉස්සරහට යන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ කියන්නේ speak up. Everybody has to speak up. If silence was our downfall, we know that. ඒක නිසා කතා කරන්න. එතකොට this silence include non voting. Non voting එකත් මේ සයිලන්ස් එකටම යනවා. ඒක නිසා කරුණා කරලා පුළුවන් තරම් මේ ගැන කතා කරලා බලන්න. ඇබ්ස්ටේන් කරන්නේ නැතුව තමන්ගේ ඡන්දේ හැමෝම පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕන. මොන විදියකට හරි පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕන. එතකොට ලසිල් ඩි සිල්වා ගැන මම පොඩි ඉන්ට්‍රොඩක්ෂන් එකක් දෙන්නම්. ලසිල් ඩි සිල්වා කියන්නේ කවුද? ලසිල් ඩි සිල්වා is the served the parliamentary secretariat for 37 years in numerous key posts in the legislative services and administration department. එතකොට nearly for 4 decades he knows what happened in that parliament. And 4 decades we know that because we changed the constitutions with various other effects, everything else, he will probably know all this by heart. And he was the principal officer of the largest ever select committee to resolve the North-East conflict in early 1990s. එතකොට he is served as a director administration of the parliament, and he is also served as a director legislative services in the parliament for over 10 years. So he knows in and out how the parliament constitution work. So he was appointed the secretary to the Presidential Commission on Serious Frauds and Corruption. Now look at this one, okay? Now Lacille de Silva was appointed to this particular commission in 2016 as the secretary of the Presidential Committee of Inquiry to investigate and inquire into serious acts of frauds, corruption, abuse of power, and abuse of state resources and privileges. So it's a massive task. And then he was working on that committee, but somebody didn't like it. And then obviously he was removed. He was removed this position. And see, he had an interview at this time, and this is the statement that was published, you can find it, by Shalika Vimerson. He said, civil servants who speak out get isolated, then beaten. So this event not only reflects the character of Lacille de Silva, and that also shows his resilience. So here we are, we have someone who is really credible, who can speak to us and explain. And about this 5-pillar governance, which is kind of a concept that he was trying to promote, but it is maybe more people have contributed to it. So the 5 pillars will be the judiciary, executive, legislature, constitution, and independent commissions, where it should be totally independent, not dependent on each other. So they are completely separate. And the constitution is the supreme, and that's the supreme law of the country. Everyone is under that. So this is the talk that we are going to listen today. And Lacille, welcome. Yes,
Thank
Lacille.
you, Chula. I'm so happy giving me an opportunity to speak to all of you. And it's a pleasure basically to share the kind of knowledge that we have gathered throughout, you know, a few decades, I would say. And at the same time, I'm happy that you mentioned that I served Parliament for 37 years. Yes. And it was indeed a pleasure because we saw the kind of, in the early stages, a different parliament. Unfortunately, lately I saw something different and something unimaginable, because in a parliament it can't happen that way. As I always keep everybody informed, it's a representative parliament and we have elected them having spent billions of rupees. So the biggest problem is, unfortunately, the last, I would say, 3 decades or so since the 70s, the elections basically they nominated uh, members who really don't understand. I'm sorry for saying that. Who does not understand what their social responsibility and the social contract is. And nowadays, at this moment, you can see a parliament which is totally disgraceful and in accordance with the constitution, if I may say so. They wanted to create a Dharmisha society as it is stated in the constitution, and they enacted, 2 constitutions, particularly one in 72 and the other one in 78. Now, both these constitutions, I would say, did not really uh, do what has been prescribed there, what is stated there, because they really wanted to, take the power basically from the citizens. Whatever said and done until the 70s, we saw a parliament where, to a great extent, there were also serious shortcomings, once here and there, but mostly after the 70s, we have gone through a lot of hardships because I would say the blame must go to the parliament, because parliament, they say, particularly John Stuart Mill had said that it should be the place where you have the eyes, ears, and the voice of the people. So it didn't happen. Now let me try and go straight away because I don't want to waste too much of time. Now let me also say, what is Parliament? That's the place where they enact laws, and they should enact laws also as stated in the Constitution. What happens? There are laws that have complete in conflict with the constitution, because now PTA similarly, and even this online what is online act. So these are certain acts that have been introduced particularly because they wanted power and they wanted to control basically the citizens. I think that's not the way how it should happen. All what I personally think is, like what we discussed earlier, parliament is a body where they have to always, in a country where there's a constitution, and the constitution sets out the guidelines, instructions, all that, and even the powers, the limitations, all that. So what we really find today, they have no regard whatsoever. අපි දකිනවා constitution එකක් තියෙනවද කියලාවත් හිතන්නේ නැති තත්ත්වයකට බොහෝ විට ඒගොල්ලෝ කටයුතු කරලා තියෙනවා. Unfortunately, even in the judiciary, it has been mentioned on a number of instances where there has been violations, but the judiciary has no powers to change laws what have been enacted in parliament. එතන නැහැ අර judicially ඒක දීලා නැහැ constitution එකෙන්. What I personally think is it is very important nowadays to think in terms of building up a new culture, at least a new country, in order to change the whole system. ඇතට ඒක නිසා තමයි අපි කල්පනා කරන්න විශේෂයෙන්ම a five pillar system of governance. දැන් අපි පුරුදු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ අවුරුදු ඒ කියන්නේ 30කට 40කට විතර ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වේ three pillar state. The legislature, the executive and the judiciary. ඊට පස්සේ the fourth pillar they have included, especially United Nations and the World Bank had said, regulatory commissions. Now we have gone through this system with the four pillars, but in our country they never mentioned that there are four pillars accepted by the global community. මම කියන්නේ four pillar විතරක් තිබිලා වැඩක් නැහැ. මොකද හේතුව අපේ රටේ බරපතලම ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙලා තියෙනවා from say even after independence, say immediately after independence in 1948 itself. You might be able to remember there was this disenfranchisement of estate, workers. The population was about 10% of the total population. එහෙම තියෙද්දි ඒගොල්ලොන්ට කරපු දේ වගේම දිගින් දිග මේ සිද්ධ වෙච්ච දේවල් I don't think it's good, unhealthy moves. So what is important here right now, we have to consider, looking at the whole thing futuristically, how Chula five pillar government අපිට ඒක දාන්න පුළුවන්ද straight away?
Yeah. I'll put it now. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go back to the slides and then I will be going down to the five pillars. We'll start with the constitution.
Yeah.
And so the next slide, I will go to that. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Actually, the constitution shall be upheld as supreme law of the country that represents rights, privileges, and entitlements of the people who shall be considered sovereign. අපි දන්නවා එහෙම කිව්වට constitution එකේ පැහැදිලිවම constitution එකේ කියලා තියෙනවා අපි කියන්නේ supreme law එක හැටියට. නමුත් supreme law එකක් එහෙම තිබුණට ඇත්තට supreme law එකට පටහැනි නීති සම්පාදනය කරලා තියෙනවා. supreme law එකේ තියෙන rights and privileges ජනතාවට බොහෝ විට ප්‍රශ්නකාරී විදිහට ඒවා දීලා නැහැ. එහෙමත් බැලුවොත් අනිත් පැත්ත බැලුවොත් සමහර වෙලාවට ඊට පරිබාහිරව ඒගොල්ලෝ දේශපාලකයෝ තමන්ගේ අයිතිවාසිකම් තමන්ට අහිමි කියන්නේ නැති දේවල් පවා යම්කිසි ආකාරයකට හිමි කරගෙන තියෙනවා. ඒකට මූලික ගැටලුවක් තමයි මම දකින්නේ මේ රට තුල අපි දකිනවා රටක් හැටියට ගත්තොත් ඒ තියෙන සිස්ටම් එක ඒ ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න විශේෂයෙන්ම බාධාවක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මම දකින්නේ මේ කන්ස්ටිටියුෂන් එකට උඩින් ඉන්නවා ජනාධිපතිවරයා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් රටක නීතිය ඉහළින්ම තියෙන්න ඕන. අපේ රටේ නීතිය සම්පාදනය කළ තියෙන 1978 ඉඳලා පැහැදිලිවම ඒ නීතිය හැමෝටම ඒ කියන්නේ දේශපාලකයට යට. එතකොට ජනාධිපතිවරයා ඉහළින් ඉන්නවා. ඒ වගේම පාර්ලිමේන්තුව පවා කිසියම් ආකාරයක ජනාධිපතිවරයාගේ රැකවරණය යටතේ, with all those powers and privileges president enjoys, he knows how to manipulate, what to do, and how to sort of, he has nearly destroyed the entire system. In my view, what I would suggest is we have to introduce the five pillar system by removing, abolishing the presidency, because with the presidency, I don't think a constitution can really remain in the country. And the constitution guarantees, whatever said and done, judicial independence, even at present, whatever it is, they know how to manipulate. So this kind of system, I don't think it could be possible for us to move forward if we want to move forward, achieve growth and development, even economically. So what I personally think, there needs to be entrenched provisions of the constitution. One, supremacy of the constitution and the rights, privileges, and entitlements of the people. Two, independence of the judiciary. Three, bicameral parliamentary form of governance. Senate and the upper house. The Senate and the upper house was there until 72. They abolished the Senate in 1972 because they knew if the Senate was there, they could not have pushed through the constitution. Unfortunately, the constitution was also flawed even in 72. Now, even in 78, it was a seriously flawed constitution because separation of powers, and they have consolidated all those powers to the president. Now, having done that, the entire system, the judiciary, the public sector, came under directly under the president. Appointments were given by the president. Article 52(1) says secretaries are appointed by the president. So this system, I don't think, works, because even in other countries, public service, the appointments are done independently. Actually, if I may tell you, in 1853 in England, there was a report called North Court and Trevelyan report. Until then, the appointments to the public sector was given by the King of England. So unfortunate situation, our leaders in 72 went back to the system that existed even in England before 1853, which is slavery. I mean, which is wrong. Now, for this purpose, again, even in USA, after 1853 amendments introduced in the UK, in 1883 in USA they introduced an act called, what it is, the Pendleton Act. Pendleton Act was basically for civil service reforms. It is very important. Civil service is a professional service. Like in the judiciary, it has to be given the necessary independence. Then only they can deliver, because whatever the plans that have been drawn up, the execution part of it is done by the executive. So you need specialists, the professionals, people who are capable of delivering all that. Now, that again, we in this whole system we propose, it is very important. අපට අවශ්‍යයි judiciary එක වගේම public sector institutions independence දීලා කාර්යක්ෂම public සේවා service එකක් හදන්න. මොකද 1970 දශකයේ දක්වා අපි දන්නවා දූෂණය වංචාව පවා මේ රටේ මේ විදිහට තිබුණේ නැහැ. ඒ මොකද හේතුව ඒ රාජ්‍ය මුදල් පැහැදිලිවම ඒ ආයතන වලට දීලා ඒ ආයතන ඒ ආකාරයෙන් යම්කිසි විදියකට ඒ සේවාවන් කරා. දැන් අපි හිතමු අධ්‍යාපනයට දෙන සල්ලි ටික. ඒ සල්ලි ටික ඒ අර මුදල් සියලුම දේවල් ඒ සේවාවන් ඒ ආකාරයෙන් අකුරටම මේ වැය කරා. අද කාලේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ හෙල්ත් සෙක්ටර් එක හොඳ උදාහරණය. අධ්‍යාපනයේත් එහෙමයි. අපිට එච්චර ලොකු දේවල් අපිට අධ්‍යාපනයේ දැන් මේ මෑත කාලෙදී හම්බෙලා නැහැ. නමුත් දූෂණය වංචාව ඉහවහා ගිහලා තියෙනවා. හෙල්ත් සෙක්ටර් එකේ අර මුදල් ඒ සියලුම දේවල් ක්‍රමවේද, එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ නීති රීති, ඒ වගේම අපි දන්න ඔය NMR එක තියෙද්දි ඒ සිස්ටම් එක කඩා දාලා ඇමතිවරයාගේ වෙන්න පුළුවන් එවැනි බලපෑම් මත එහෙම කඩා දාලා ඒ මුදල්, ඒ රාජ්‍ය මුදල් විනාශයට පත් කරා. I like to say, up to 1972, I mean, public money was handled by even public officers. So I would say again, Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers, කියලා තියෙනවා රාජ්‍ය මුදල් හසුරුවන්න ඕන, අතපත ගන්න ඕන තමන්ගේ හෘද සාක්ෂියත් එක්ක කියලා. With that's a kind of important way you have to handle public money. But unfortunately, at present, they don't do all that. So what is important here, we have to always remember public service needs to be completely taken away, because it has to be depoliticized. එහෙම කරොත් ඒ වගේ කරන්න පුළුවන්. අනිත් එක තමයි independent commissions. Sorry, bicameral parliamentary governance, Senate and Upper House. Senate and Upper House එකේ තව එකක් මට කියන්න ඕනකම තියෙනවා. Senate එක අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව පැහැදිලිවම checks and balances වලට යටත් කරන්න. ඒ උඩින් තියෙන්නේ නීති සම්පාදනයේදී උනත් ඒක අත්‍යවශ්‍යම තිබිය යුතු ආයතනයක්. ඒ පාර independent commissions අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ රාජ්‍ය සේවාවේ ඒ සුවිශේෂී කාර්යභාරයන්. අපි හිතමු දැන් national audit, ඒක අත්‍යවශ්‍යම කළ යුතු දෙයක්. ඇත්තට අද රටේ අපේ රටේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ඒවා කෙරෙන්නේ නැහැ, ඒවා කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි ගත්තොත් 17 වෙනි සංශෝධනය 2001 හඳුන්වලා දුන්නේ ජනාධිපතිවරයාගේ බලතල අඩු කරන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ ජනාධිපතිවරයාට අතිවිශාල බලතල රාශියක් තියෙන නිසා කාලයක් තිස්සේ 1978 ඉඳලම 94 වෙනකන් සාකච්ඡාවට ලක් වුණා. 94 දී චන්ද්‍රිකා කුමාරතුංග ආවේ ඒ ජනාධිපති ධූර අහෝසි කරනවා කියලා. නමුත් එයා මාස 6ක් කල් දීලා ඒත් ඒක කරේ නැහැ. එතකොට දෙදස් එක 17th amendment එක දුන්නේ ජනතාවගේ බරපතල ඉල්ලීමක් තිබුණා මේ ප්‍රතිශෝධන අවශ්‍යයි කියලා. නොකර බැරි නිසා ඒක කරා. හැබැයි ඒක කරාට අවසානයේදී එහෙම කරලා ඉවර වෙලත් ඒ වගේ දේවල් වලින් නැවත 18 වෙනි සංශෝධනය ගෙනාව. 18 වෙනි සංශෝධනය මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ඒක තිබිච්ච සියලුම දේවල් අහෝසි කරලා අර කන්ස්ටිටියුෂන් කවුන්සිල් එක පාර්ලිමේන්ටරි කවුන්සිල් කරා. ඒ වගේම නැවත යාගේ බලය ගත්ත ඒ පත් කිරීම කරන්න. ඇත්තට මේ සිස්ටම් එක සම්පූර්ණ වැරදි. එතනත් අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ එතනදී clean up, to clean up the system. So what do we need? ඒක නිසා අපිට ওই commissions establish කරත් ඒ commissions වලින් පවා ඒ කාර්යභාර ඉෂ්ට වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මූලික ගැටලුව ඒවටත් පත් කරන්නේ ඒ ආකාරයෙන් තමන්ගේ ගෝල බාලය. ඒක නිසා පැහැදිලිවම මේ සිස්ටම් එක නිවැරදි වෙන්න ඕන. මට තව එකක් කියන්න ඕන. මට මතක් වෙච්ච දෙයක් ඒක දැන් අපි දැන් 2015 මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපති ධූරයට පත් වුණාට පස්සේ 17 වෙනි සංශෝධනයේ තිබිච්ච ඒ ප්‍රොවිෂන්ස් ඒ පත් කිරීම දෙන්න ඕන කන්ස්ටිටියුෂනල් කවුන්සිල් එක හරහා ඒ ක්‍රමවේදය තුල. නමුත් මෙයා ඒක එහෙම තියෙද්දි ඒක නොසලකා හැරලා Tamanට ඕන කාණ්ඩේ පත් කරා. හැබැයි එතනදී දෙන්නෙක් මේ පත්වීම බාරගත්තේ නැහැ. That was Subha Sahabandu, one of the senior lawyers, appoint කරලා තිබුණා. එයා කිව්වා this appointment is totally unconstitutional, I don't accept it. අනිත් එක්කෙනා professor lady මේ කවුද මේ දීපිකා උඩගම. අන්න ඒ දෙන්න විතරයි මේ ඉතිහාසයේම තමන්ට දීපු පත්වීම් දෙකක් එපා කියලා තියෙන්නේ. අද රටේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ බොහෝ විට හැම කෙනෙක්ම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන මොකක් හරි යම් කිසි විදිහකට තනතුරකට ගිහිල්ලා තමන්ගේ වරප්‍රසාද ටික පෞද්ගලිකව භුක්ති විඳින්න එක වෙනස් වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒක නිසා ඒකට I'm sorry, it got disconnected. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So we've got all the other videos down. I think it's something to do with the broadband. So so you can speak now. So it's only your videos on at the moment. So we should be all right. Okay. Carry on, yeah.
Okay. So what happened? Now we were going to speak about independent commissions, and basically independent commissions need to be totally independent, and they can't. The president also can't interfere. But unfortunately, he said it is under the executive. No, it is wrong. Independent commissions are independent, and we have to ensure independence is given through, because all what they do is through the system by giving political stooges, appointing to various positions. So naturally, the system that we have proposed is totally independent, and there are other checks and balances also in place. So all what we need to do to ensure that president's powers need to be curtailed, particularly with regard to appointments. So passage of bills in parliament, that's a long process, and it is stated, but unfortunately that doesn't happen properly, because now see even emergency bills, whatever the bills that they need to push through in a hurry. Actually, most of the bills that they have even introduced as emergency bills are basically with an ulterior motive, I would say. Now, there was an constitutional amendments with regard to those emergency bills, which was 14 days. It was reduced to 7 days. Why is that? Because they want to sort of create, laws that are deadly, in the sense that are harmful to the people. So naturally, it is very important. Let me also say it this way. All what we need to do is to send a set of good people to parliament, so that they will definitely adhere, or at least respect, abide by the oath that they have given, and conform to constitutional standards. Now, all constitutional amendments to need consensual house approval. Basically, this two-thirds system is okay, but at the same time, if you have the Senate has a job. Senate has a duty to review all those enactments and all that. So naturally, Senate is another authority where they do the necessary checks and balances. That was to a great extent working until 72. Unfortunately, after abolition of the Senate, things have been in a terrible state of affairs. Now, the other thing is, now parliamentary quorum, this must be taken very seriously, because in 1948, in the Salisbury Constitution, we had 101 members of parliament. So 101 members of parliament, 1/5 of the whole thing was 20, and 20 members were the quorum. So you have to have 20, you had to have 20 even in 1948 up to, because in 57 in 1950s it was increased up to 157, and they never increased the quorum there also. They did the same thing in 1968. I mean 1972 they raised it to 168 members of parliament. That again they never increased the quorum. Now in 1972 they raised it to 196. They never increased the quorum. Still it is 20. Now in Act number 14th Amendment increased national list in 87, 88 to 225. They never wanted to touch and improve or increase the quorum. So my suggestion is, in Netherlands and number of other countries, the quorum is half plus one. If they have 100, the quorum is 51. So similarly, in our country, we have to be very strict and very rigid about it. I personally would suggest at least 85% of the core should be made the quorum, because they should be made, they should be pushed in order to commit themselves to do the parliamentary work much better than what they are doing now. For them, they come to parliament, they even go to sleep inside the chambers. You can see Nimal Sripal sleeping always. There are few others as well, sometimes sleeping, nodding. So this system needs to be changed. It has to be, we have to create a culture where a working culture. So all that has to be changed. And I think if that is done, it could be possible. And particularly, there should be entrenched provisions in the constitution, number of things. Those entrenched provisions are provisions that cannot be amended easily. I mean, difficult process to amend.
So
Can we take up the next one?
shall we have a short Q&A on this subject
Please.
of constitution? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
go ahead,
So,
Richula.
so we'll do that, and then we'll see everybody there, and then we can
Yeah.
have a small Q&A. And obviously, you'll have to unmute yourselves when you are asking questions from Lacille, please. Yeah. Then after session, we will move to the next pillar. Yeah. Anybody having any questions or comments on what Lacille has spoken?
Can I say
Yeah,
anything?
yeah, Kirti, please. Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry I'm late for the meeting. I miscalculated my time. So the pillar we are talking about is the constitution now, are we?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So
Now,
any questions on that? Then we will move to the other. But at the end, we will have another Q&A session. So you can collectively
I
ask.
do have a question. I mean, Lucille highlighted a very important point. That is the quorum. They have maintained the quorum at 20 for the last 30, 40 years for their convenience, which is wrong.
Which is wrong.
So I fully agree that the quorum needs to be increased. I think there's an echo in my. Can you hear me, by the way?
Lacille can hear, I think. He can hear.
I can hear
Right.
you.
So the one thing I would say is that I think I don't know if I misunderstood Lucille. He said the quorum should be made 50% or something, 85%. Is that correct?
Is it
So
okay
so
now?
what
Can
I
you
would like to say is that there has to
now?
be a very
Yeah. Now there are certain countries, 50% plus one. Now say roughly, if you have 100 members in the parliament,
I did
50% means,
understand that, but what I'm
yeah.
questioning is let me explain what my proposal is. There has to be a difference between the quorum and the number of votes required to uh,
The law, whatever.
pass certain bills. Depending on the nature of the bill, there should be certain bills, they must have 80, 75% or whatever of the total number of seats in the parliament, not the quorum. But the quorum can be 1/5 or 1/3 of the membership. But for special bills, emergency bills or whatever, they must get not 50% of the quorum, but at least 75% of the entire membership,
House.
entire house.
Yeah,
That's what
Kirti, that is exactly what we discussed at the very beginning about that people can't abstain. So it comes to that using saying that what you're saying that the total number of seats, if you are 225, then whoever who comes at a percentage should be from 2 to 5 and
yes.
not the ones who are present. So we've actually done that. Leonard, yes, Leonard.
Uh, yes, just a small question. It's about the independent commission. Now, is it different from the parliamentary commission? Because I remember in the case of Sri Bandaranaike's case, they had a parliamentary commission, and of course, majority of them are from the government, and therefore we obviously expect the government voice to be expressed in this commission. Now, is it different from the independent commission that we are talking about?
Yes, actually now Shirani Bandaranaike, those are called select committees of parliament. Parliament can appoint, to go into anything, and that is a duty that is entrusted to go into it and then report back to parliament as to what their recommendations are. Now, independent commissions, there are two types: independent commissions and regulatory authorities. That's the fourth pillar we are talking about. So now in parliament, the biggest problem is we must understand this also. Parliament in committees, there can't be any politics. It has to be apolitical. So what has happened here in parliament in Sri Lanka, unfortunately since the 70s, they carry their party label and they discuss all those issues, you know, in order to push their party, whatever position. That is totally unparliamentary. That is not the way it should be done. Parliament is a place, even in the chambers, it is a political organization when it comes to the floor of the house, because it's a national issue in the sense they have to discuss all those with a view to maybe resolve problems in the country, or to go deep into the whole thing. And you can't have political kind of aspirations in that. Now unfortunately the present situation here is so unpleasant and so disgusting, let me say it that way. That should not be. And that is why we have even recommended parliamentary studies and training. Now in India, we are like there's a place, even we send our officials. Actually I went in 1984 for the first time. That was a superb training at the age of about 25 years of age. So we saw the kind of parliamentary training, and that trains not only the parliamentary officials, it trains public officers, it trains even members of parliament and state officials, state members of parliament in India. So similarly in Canada, there's another institution similarly. So like that, even I was also lucky in UK. There are similar institutions. So what I personally think is, now I'm going a little bit far away from this. Basically, Parliament is a place where they can't take politics into it. It has to be apolitical. The gentleman who raised this question asked a very valid question, whether parliamentary committees are independent committees are two different. Yes, two different things. The parliamentary select committees, or maybe now you have finance committees, various other committees, public petitions committee. In those committees, parliamentarians have to discuss all those issues based on independently, without looking through different kinds of glasses, whether it is political or party or whatever. So this is a problem. Now we had a problem with Shirani Bandaranaike case. That was a select committee appointed. I think that's not the way it should be done. They found fault with her, so there are so many other issues also, because she was not given an opportunity. It was just a kind of a one-sided committee. So these things can't happen. Now I have mentioned here that I was heading the committee on a Northeast Select Committee. That was the first ever committee with such a huge number. We did our best. Unfortunately, the parliamentarians, again, there were biased. They were looking through their political whatever, or in different ways. Actually, we committed ourselves. We worked so hard to ensure the resolution of the war, but unfortunately, we couldn't do that. It was a waste of money, waste of time, waste of energies of all of us, everybody. So eventually, that was in 90s. The war ultimately ended. I won't even use the word victory. No, this is a matter because politically, we were at loggerheads, and actually they created problems. If I may go even beyond, there was a problem in 1972 in Jaffna. Actually, that was a thing called what is this Tamil International Conference. The first meeting was held in Kuala Lumpur, and it was keynote address was by the Prime Minister then, Razak Mansour, if I remember right the name. Then the second one was in Madras. The third one was in France, and the fourth one was in Jaffna. So our politicians sent a load of police officers to the event, and there was a commotion. And later, one boy died, and that was also unexpected and unnecessary. I mean, that was wrong. So what happened? Let me also say that rulers should not work that way. And the youth there, I think if I remember right, it was one Silva. Now the final day, just before the body was taken out, 7 boys, he cut the fingers and kept පොට්ටු හතක් තිව ඒ ළමයාගේ මූණේ ඒ සිවකුමාරන්ගේ කිව්වා we will continue with your struggle. අන්න එහෙමයි. අනිත් එක ඒකට ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉල්ලුවා මේ police investigations එකක්වත් කරේ නැහැ. ඒ වගේම තමයි දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් ඔයි even after the war, they were, I mean, no justice done. Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommended a lot of things. Most of the things have not been even considered, not implemented. So this is disgusting. Not that way. I think I have gone a little beyond. Can I? Is there anything more to be clarified, please?
Kirti's got a question, but we have to move on. So yes, Kirti.
No,
Yes.
I do have 2 questions. Well, I have one observation and a question.
Yeah.
My observation is that you mentioned that India and other countries training MPs or whatever. In the UK, even a council member has to go through a training procedure to make sure that they understand how the things are done. It's the rule. So
you're right.
I fully agree with that. The point I wanted to ask is this question. The independent commissions, I didn't understand what are the checks and balances to make sure that
we are coming to independent commissions. We are only doing the constitution at the moment. So shall we go on to the next pillar? Then you can ask independent commission once you listen to him. Yeah.
Let's take it at that.
Yeah, let's do the next one, because otherwise we won't have time to finish it all. So the next one is the legislature that we will present as the next pillar. And yes, okay, current legislature, you can start, Lacille. Yeah.
The electoral system that elects the people's representatives to legislature is flawed, because the first past post system was functioning quite satisfactorily, and there were seats, bahuvasana tibuna, e wage systems tibuna. Fortunately, it would have been given more whatever improvements, but without doing all that, Jaya wanted to say elect a UNP government, because on their calculation they had found it was the UNP always that got the maximum number of votes, but they couldn't get a government elected, So make a tailor-made constitution, electoral system, a flawed system, because ඒක නිසා තමයි මේ රටේ මෙච්චර හොරකම් වෙන්නේ. ඇත්තටම අපි දන්නවා മന്ത്രിවරයෙක් සමහර වෙලාවට මේගොල්ලෝගේ හිතවත්කම් උඩ කොහොම හරි පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ආවට පස්සේ ඊළඟ මැතිවරණය බොහෝ විට දිනන්නේ ආණ්ඩුවේම සල්ලි හොරකම් කරලා ඒ විදියට විශාල මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් වැය කරලා. ඒ මොකද හේතුව අර ෆස්ට් පාස් පෝස්ට් සිස්ටම් එක ලිමිටඩ් ඒරියා. මේක එහෙම නෙවෙයි, මුළු දිස්ත්‍රික්කයම කැම්පේන් එක ගෙනියන්න ඕන. ඒක නිසා ඒගොල්ලෝ යම්කිසි විදිහකට මුදල් උපය ගන්නෙත් අපේ සල්ලි වලින්, රාජ්‍ය මුදල්. ඒක නිසා තමයි හොරකම යම්කිසි විදිහකට ආවේ. ඒකට නිසා තමයි සෙක්‍රටරි පත් කරන්නේ මේ 52ක ව්‍යවස්ථාව යටතේ පැහැදිලිවම ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕන කෙනෙක්. අර ඉස්සර චීෆ් accounting officer, ඒක concept එකක්. ඒක එංගලන්තෙත් තියෙනවා, කැනඩාවෙත් තියෙනවා, ඇමරිකාවෙත් තියෙනවා, විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔය commonwealth countries වල තියෙනවා. එයාට වගකීමක් තියෙන හැම සතයක්ම you know count කරන්න එයා වක් කියන්න ඕන සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම එයා තමයි වක් කියන්න ඕන. දැන් එහෙම නෙවෙයි. මිනිස්ටර් කියන දෙයක් අනුව බොහෝ විට අර මිනිහට සිද්ධ වෙනවා තමන්ගේ කොන්ද කඩා ගන්න. ඒ විදිහට කොන්ද කඩාගෙන කොන්ද තියාගෙන හිටියේ නැත්නම් ඇත්තට ඒගොල්ලෝ දොට්ට දාලා තියෙන. මේ වගේ දේවල් වෙනවා. රාජකාරී කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් ඔන්නෝම සිස්ටම් එකක් තියෙනවා. එන්න ඒ වගේ තත්ත්වයක් යටතේ. Can I, yeah? Anith එක, it is centered on systemic inadequacies that lack adherence to established rules in the electoral procedure. ඇත්තටම මේ සිස්ටම් එක තුල බොහෝ විට සල්ලි දීලා හරි යම් කිසි විදිහකට වළක්වන්න පුළුවන්. අර චූලා විස්තර කරා වගේ ඇත්තටම ඡන්දේ මේ සමහර වෙලාවකට අපි හිතමු දැන් ওই ටකරන් ඒ වගේ දේවල් දීලා වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඇත්තට දැන් අනිත් පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් ඊට වඩා ගැඹුරට පැත්තක් ගිහිලා තියෙන දැන් අපිට 1970 ගණන් වල වෙනකන් ඒ කාලේ දුන්නේ නැහැ ওই සපත්තු පෑස් අරන් දුන්නේ නැහැ යුනිෆෝම්ස් අරන් දුන්නේ නැහැ පොත් දුන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි এডুকেෂන් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ්ස් ඉතාමත්ම හොඳයි. එතනත් පොඩි අඩුපාඩුවක් තියුණා. මොකද්ද ක්‍රමානුකූලව ඒ මොකද 71 අර මේ විශේෂයෙන් 94 මේ ප්‍රෙසිඩෙන්ෂල් කමිෂන් එකක් මේ පත් කරා විශේෂයෙන් ওই යූත් අන්රෙස්ට් එක මොකද්ද හේතුව කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒකෙදි කියලා තිබුණා ගමට කැකිරි කොළඹට කිරි. ඒකට හේතුව දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් විශේෂයෙන් රොයල් ඒ වගේ පාසල් වලට ගොඩාක් පහසුකම් දීලා තිබුණා. දැන් අපි දන්නවා විශේෂයෙන්ම දැන් ওই මේ පීසා කියලා තියෙනවා. මේ මොකක්ද ඒකට කියන්නේ what is program of international student assessment කියලා ලෝකෙම තියෙනවා. ඒකේ බලන්නේ science, maths and reading. ඒක අනුව අපේ රට 2000 වගේ කාලෙ වෙනකොටම ඒ ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ්ස් වල ඉතාම ඉහළ මට්ටමක ඉඳලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒ තුල පැහැදිලිවම අර සේවාවන් දුන්නා. අද කාලේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ඒ සම්පත්තික සාධාරණව බෙදෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් ඔන්න ඔය වගේ ගැටලුත් තියෙනවා. එන්නේ ඒවත් මෙන්න මේකට වැටෙන්න ඕන. ඒ කියන්නේ අර වෝට් බයින් වලට ඉන්නේ ආකාරයෙන් කපටි විදියට, දූෂිත විදියට තමන්ගේ හිතවත් කොටසක් බිහි කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ ලොකු ප්‍රදේශයක් ඉන්න නිසා මෙන්න මේ විදිහට කපටිකම් කරලා ඡන්ද ලබා ගන්න වැඩ පිළිවෙලක් තියෙන. ඒක නිසා අපි මීට වඩා quality education system වෙන්න පුළුවන්, health system කරන්න කොහොමද කියලා බලන්න ඕන. Then the third one, this in turn prevents free and fair elections and hinders the accountability of the elected representatives to their respective electorates. පාර්ලිමේන්තු එකට පත් වුණත් යම් කිසි විදිහකට ඒ තමන්ට වග කියන മന്ത്രിවරයෙක් නැහැ. ඒක බරපතල ප්‍රශ්නයක්. ඒකත් විසඳන වැඩ පිළිවෙලක් අපට අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. Shall we? Yeah, the way election rules should change. ඇත්තටම දැන් ඕකෙදි තවත් එකක් සඳහන් කරන්න ඕන. දැන් මේ සිස්ටම් වෙනස් කරන්න ඕන කියලා අපේ සල්ලි වැය කරලා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේම you know this the present prime minister in 2007 had agreed he chaired the committee select committee on electoral reforms කියන එක යා chair කරේ 2007 ඒ committee එකේ තීරණයක් ගත්තා electoral system must be immediately changed කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ first past post system එකත් එක්ක mixed representative system එකක්. ඒක හොඳයි. හැබැයි ඒක කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් වඩාත් හොඳයි. නමුත් ඒ 2007 කරපු system එක recommendation වෙනස අදටත් implement කරලා නැහැ. ඇත්තට ඒ system එකවත් අපේ කරන්න පුළුවන් දැන් චූලා මේක ලස්සනට මේක detail කරලා තියෙනවා. මොකද ඒක චූලා එක study කරලා ඒ system එක කියලා තියෙන්නේ. I think you will be able to explain a lot better, right Chula, what you all are proposing here. This we agree totally. Chula? Establish a district merit order to prevent the perpetuation of political dynasties, promote allegiance with local people and voter protection, and enhance the quality of the vote. Actually, the quality of the vote in a දැන් CWW කන්නගර මහත්තයත් කියලා තියෙන 1930 ගණන් වලම education is the most important thing. එතකොට ඒකම කියලා තියෙනවා ඔයි තොමස් ජෙෆර්සන් ඇමරිකාවේ 1776. එතකොට ඊට පස්සේ ඔය දැන් ඉංග්ලන්ඩ් වල පවා ඔක සාකච්ඡාවට ලක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් අපිට අර වෝට් එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන විදිහට ඉන්ටෙලිජන්ට්ලි වෝට් එකක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් විදිහට වෙන විදිහට අද සමාජයේ හරිගස්සගෙන යන බවක් නෙවෙයි මට පේන්නේ අර තිවිච් එකත් කඩා දාලා. ඒ මොකද 1970 දශකයේ ඉඳලා 77 ඉඳලා අද වෙනතුරු ඉස්කෝලේ 1500ක් වහලා තියෙනවා. අපේ සාක්ෂරතාව 1977 වෙනකොට 87ක් විතර තිබුණා මේ ග්ලෝබලි. ඉන්දියාව China 65, India 35. එතකොට දැන් එහෙම තිබිච්ච රටක ඉහළම සාක්ෂරතාවයක් තිබිච්ච රටක අපේ දැන් ක්‍රමානුකූලව අධ්‍යාපනය කඩා වැටෙනවා, හෙල්ත් සෙක්ටර් කඩා වැටෙනවා. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ වගේ දේවලුත් කතා කරන්න වෙනවා කොහොමද අර ඒ සමාන ඡන්දයක් එහෙම විදිහට ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන වටපිටාවක් හදන්න කියලා. Apply strict voter eligibility criteria to meet at least one at the minimum requirement to hold a job the public sector to ensure the candidate's eligibility and competence and to prevent the nomination of individuals with criminal records. ඇත්තටම මේක හරිම ගැටලුවක්. මොකද හේතුව කවදාකවත් රාජ්‍ය සේවාව හෝ වේවා ඒ වගේම පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ක්‍රිමිනල් කෙනෙක් දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් අර චොකාමල්ලි මේ රත්නපුර දිස්ත්‍රික්කේ ඇත්තටම එයාට දඬුවමක් ලැබලා තිබුණා මිනි මරණ කියන්නේ ඝාතනයක් සම්බන්ධයෙන් and he was serving a death sentence. පස්සේ දැන් එතනදී උනත් ඒ ආකාරයෙන් ඒ සිස්ටම් එක යම් ආකාරයකට වෙනස් කරලා එයාට එන්න පුළුවන්කම ලැබුණා. දැන් අපි තව පැත්තකින් ගත්තොත් දැන් මේ රණතුංග ප්‍රසන්න රණතුංගටත් මිලියන ගාණක් ෆයින් එකක් ගෙවන්න කියලා කිව්වා. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් එයාට ඒ දඬුවම ලැබිලා and he was actually penalized, fined, and he's under an appeal. හැබැයි appeal එකක් තියෙනවා නම් අද උනත් වෙන තැනක උනා නම් සාමාන්‍ය රාජ්‍ය සේවකයෙකුට උනා නම් ඔය වගේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙනවා. අපි ගත්තොත් මෙන්න මේකම නිසා තමයි පොලිසිය IGPට පවා සුප්‍රීම කෝට් එකේ දඬුවම් ලැබලා තියෙද්දි එවැනි තනතුරකටත් යන්න තියෙනවා. ඇත්තටම we have to be very strict about this. If there is if somebody is a criminal, I mean they should not be permitted at all in any position, whether it is in parliament or even in the public sector, any other institution. Declaration of assets and liabilities. ඇත්තට ඒක කරන්න ඕන අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම. නමුත් වෙලා තියෙන උතන එක ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා. declaration of assets declare කරාට වැඩක් නැහැ. මොකද හේතුව උතන මූලික ගැටලුව තමයි ඒකෙම තියෙන
We can hear you.
You can hear me, no?
Yeah.
So declaration of assets, the biggest problem is even if you obtain, say, the assets of member X, you can't publish it. So what is this purpose? This is completely unheard in other countries. It should be able to be published. You should be able to, ask him, how did you amass such a lot of wealth, right? So these are problems. This needs to be corrected without any say whatever it is at the earliest possible opportunity. And I don't think they will do that. I would always recommend a decent set of people need to be in the coming elections in the future. Then the next one, bonus seat allocation. Actually, bonus seat allocation is something I don't approve because then they get more seats. That's not the way. What I believe is the parliament needs to be reduced even further, say down, maybe about 100, because look at India, 1.3 billion, I mean, we'll say close upon 4 billion, right? They have only 545 members. Look at Australia, same population, they have only 150. I mean, our country is smaller, but at the same time, even economically, we need to be more thrifty. I mean, we need to be very careful. We don't have to waste our money, public money. So naturally, 100 members would be definitely sufficient. And if you have the Senate, actually, if you have the provincial councils also, because we need to consider devolution of power. That must be definitely considered. So naturally, we don't have to have 100 more than 100, because my logic is this. Now, 13th Amendment was brought in 1987, right? When when it was introduced, devolution of power, setting up a provincial councils, the 14th Amendment, national list, basically from 196 to 225. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can. So it went up to 225 after setting up the provincial council. It's a joke, So because what they should have done was, if that was the case, if they wanted to bring in, they said that they wanted educated people. For that only they said a national list was required. Actually, they could have allocated from the 196, because that was after the creation of this provincial councils. So this is how they have done. They had no reason to increase the numbers, having created provincial councils. This is the problem.
Yeah. So,
So,
shall we go to the next
shall we
one?
go to the next one? Please. Yes. Manifesto accountability must be ensured, requiring contestants and yes, that is very correct. Now we know basically in 2002, that was what was this Ranil Wickremesinghe's, he came out with a lot of things, and again Mahinda Rajapaksa, such a lot of things, say මොකක්ද ඒකට කියන්නේ මේ wonder of Asia and so many, so naturally none of those things were fulfilled, because manifesto was simply for them to win votes. Actually in India there is a committee called assurances committee. If they give any assurances, parliament has to follow up all that and then implement. Unfortunately, when I went to India for training, I came back and I submitted a report saying that we need something like that. That was never implemented. So this is how. So likewise, I think we have to take these matters seriously. Manifesto should, if possible, even legally, there should be a system where we can create, if a promise is made through a manifesto, that has to be implemented. We can even set up, like in India, assurances committee, which has to be definitely follow up and then monitor and implement. So likewise, we have to do a lot of new things probably in the future. Please. The next one, Chula.
The party.
Yeah, actually that system was there until Mahinda Rajapaksa became the president, because with Sarath Nanda Silva, he permitted. During the war, they said they are joining the government to support, strengthen the hands of the government, and due to various whatever other reasons, even Sarath Nanda Silva ultimately ensured that they are protected. So what happens? These things need to be reconsidered, and crossovers have to be stopped completely. That's the thing that needs to be done, if possible, even at the next elections, because they cross over. Now they can be bought over for millions on millions of rupees. That was even revealed. I remember somebody said, some member said, so and so called me and offered me so much. So these things need to be stopped. And only way is to, ensure that the laws are again strengthened for the purpose, so that they'll not be able to cross over. Establish bicameral legislature to democratize the democracy. Actually, a professor, he was Tony Blair's advisor. What is this? Thomas, I forget the name, and he had said, countries like ours, all what we need to is to democratize the democracy. And actually, by reinstating the Senate, I think most of the things could be checked and improved. Now, I want to say, with regard to bicameral legislature, there was a problem. Overnight, there was a big show. They ultimately slept on the floor of the house, and there was a select committee appointed. What happened? There was a report submitted to deal with them, punish them. Unfortunately, even Karujaya Surya, during his speakership, he never took action. And during the Yahapal regime, as was promised, there was a code of conduct for members of parliament, approved. Now, this code of conduct is in force. There are all the whatever necessary lines are there. They are expected to follow the code of ethics, and actually the speaker needs to enforce all these rules and regulations that are there. If you want, I can read one or two. They say, every member shall uphold the law relating to fundamental rights and shall act in a non-discriminatory manner in the exercise, performance, and discharge of the powers, functions, and duties concerning his constituents at all times. Every member in the exercise, performance, and discharge of his powers, functions, and duties shall act in the interest of the nation as a whole, specifically towards his constituents. Like that. And furthermore, there are a few other things. Rules of conduct. Every member shall adhere to the following rules of parliament: to be conscious, to respect human rights and intrinsic dignity of the people, to act so as to merit the trust and respect of the people. Like that, there are so many, but none of those things are being adhered, and really they don't follow the code of conduct at all. So this is sad, very sad. Then creating upper house party. Soulbury constitution, yeah. Actually, the upper house is definitely a must, because that'll definitely look into the discipline. That is what they did even in the other during the Soulbury constitution days. Actually, that's what happened even in the UK, in House of Commons, in Canada, in Australia, in India. So unfortunately, abolition of the Senate was a step in the wrong direction in our country. It is time for us to restore all that once again, please. The appointment of executive prime minister. Now, at the very outset, I said the president, in this country has been in taking up a lot of time in various debates and all that it should be abolished. And in 1994, Chandrika also came with the intention and having given a promise that she will abolish, and in 6 months she gave that in writing. Unfortunately, she did not do so. Now again, at every election it came up. Now even Mahinda Rajapaksa, this is how they play various games. Mahinda Rajapaksa said, I will abolish if in case the TNA and some other party gives an assurance that they will not ask for separation. This is politics. It is not the truth. So what I personally think is, it is always better if we definitely run the country, govern the country, accept which will be acceptable to everybody. If that situation could be improved, if we can run good governance, I think there will be no need for separation, and we can probably run this country as as a united country, as a nation, like in India. Now they had the same problem in 1947 when they got independence. There were three issues. They said whether they will be able to keep India as one country without separation, and they have done that, and achieve economic growth. They have done that. They have then treat human whatever, because they had other problems like untouchables and all that. So they have brought in laws, and they have completely eradicated all that to a large extent. And there's a lot more to be done in certain other areas, but they are improving in a big way. So why have we destroyed even what we had? So what is needed here is to understand that destroy politicians have destroyed this country because they have abused all the powers, and to a great extent all what they have done was they have eventually given been so much of powers, and due to the culture of impunity, they have not been dealt with. So these are the problems that we have to probably consider. The appointment of executive prime minister, and we have to have a non-executive prime minister who will definitely executive prime minister with a non-executive president at the top, like in the Soulbury days, So that will be the system that is proposed under the 5-pillar system. Then non-executive president shall appoint a maximum of 20 ministers who will be supported by a state secretaries and also to be appointed by non-executive president. Now here it says a maximum of 20 ministers. I think this country could be run very well even with 15 ministers, because if you have a efficient secretaries of public service, I think this could be done. Unfortunately, that is the biggest problem right now, because they have given, even after ending the war, actually half the parliament, about 100 or 150, say we had ministers, deputy ministers, state ministers, and all that, right? So naturally, we can't do that. Those are the reasons ultimately we have, ended up with in a situation like ours, right, what we are facing now. So what is important here, non-executive presidential appointment, anyway, less than 20, I would say, uh, who will be accountable. Actually, under the government where there is rule of law, everybody will be accountable. Nobody will be will get out of anything. Say if they commit any kind of crime. So naturally, what we really need a country where there is rule of law.
Okay.
The list of cabinet ministers shall be directed. Sorry.
Uh, shall we move? I think because the time is getting very short. I'll put
All
all
right,
this as
okay, go ahead. Review with the responsibility of Senate Upper House. Now, actually, do I need to read, or can they
no,
whatever go
what
on the
what I
basis?
what I suggest is that we are actually planning to circulate this document at the end so that
Uh-huh.
they can send their comments as well. So we can briefly go. Otherwise, we will not have a
That's
time for Q&A, which is
yeah,
also
now, yeah, Chula, now see, be a watchdog and final authority over discipline of the parliamentarian. That is one very important reason why we need a Senate. And also even the bills and all that will be scrutinized a lot better.
okay. So let's go to the next one.
Let's move to the next
Any
one.
questions on this one? We can go to the next pillar. Any questions on this? Okay, shall we go to the next? Oh, okay. Kugadas, yes, please.
Please.
Kugadas?
My question is,
Yeah.
uh, Lacille says if we go back to Salisbury Constitution, things will be better. But
Okay.
I think the country was put in this situation starting in Salisbury Commission Constitution. That is, as he himself said, the defranchising the Indian labor. The second most important thing is Singular Only Act.
Yeah.
These two blow a death knell on the progress of the country.
You're right.
These were
Yeah.
passed when there was an executive prime minister. These were passed when there was a bicameral legislature. Nothing stopped it. And it went to the judiciary. As I said last time, the court of first instance said singular only regulations for the government officers was law. But the higher court said no, the government servant cannot this thing, and Privy Council overturned the decision. For 3 years, the judiciary did not do anything about it. So I am failed to understand how going back to the Solkali Commission is going to solve the problems. The my feeling is everybody says the prime minister is answerable to the parliament, whereas the president is not. I don't think the prime minister and cabinet are answerable to the parliament. They are strangulating the parliament, the legislator, to get the laws that they wanted to do, because there is no separation of power between executive and the legislature. That's my opinion. I need reflections from Lacille on this.
Yeah. it's a very good question. Now, to start with, right? Not only not only the judiciary, actually, even in Sri Lanka, with regard to this, the original bill in 1948, actually, once it was enacted, even the High Court in Kegol upheld that it was unjust and illegal and unconstitutional, right? But what did they do? With all those, whatever checks and balances that you had in during that period, they somehow probably using power in an illiberal way, I would say, they push through all that. Actually, I don't say it was a perfect system under this whole whatever majority kind of rule that existed here in Sri Lanka. That is for that reason only. You can tell me, Ram, what should be the alternative system that we should introduce if that is if Soulbury system is not good. I don't say Soulbury system is 100% okay because of those reasons, right? There were flaws even then, but we are recommending stricter measures where parliament needs to take up all those debates in a more open, transparent manner without any bias towards any. So unfortunately, what we have recommended here is based on various other countries and recommendations, all that are there on record. I think the system what we have recommended, the 5 pillar system, there is going to be separation of powers, all that, and the judiciary will be at the helm, because they even now in the constitution article 105 particularly says, what it is, protect, vindicate, and enforce. But does it happen? I mean, there are certain problems. Now see, even during Suddha days, brace girdle court order, right, was against the Suddha then. Similarly, even thereafter, there were very good court orders even here in Sri Lanka against the government, against those rulers, and in favor of people. So naturally, there were incidents where here and there where sometimes we would not accept. But for all purposes, I mean, we have to understand which system could be definitely be better. And tell me exactly which system would you prefer? So
So
like
yeah, yes, I think Lacille is very good that Ram has brought up these issues, because
yeah
this is still a draft document. We will circulate this what we are discussing today as a draft document.
yeah
So please do correct project suggestions, because we want ultimately to have a kind of a perfect document before we
definitely,
publicize. This is the target.
definitely.
So the whole thing today, Ram, thank you so commenting about that. The Soul Commission was brought up just as a, I think, example, rather than to go back to it, because
I
the
think
Senate
Preeti
was,
also wants, Chula, Preeti also wants. I saw a note
yeah,
here.
yeah, there are
Just
two people now. Nirmalan is there first, and then Preeti. Yes, let's take the questions. Yeah, Nirmalan.
Yes, so actually, Lacille,
yeah,
I mean, I think you know my thinking on this to a large extent, so I will not
yeah,
bring
yeah,
the details up. And as you have
yeah.
invited Ram to make his recommendations, I will also be making my recommendations. But
Good.
based on what Ram said, I want to point out something, that is, it appears from what he said that there is something beyond the constitution at work. Now, Soulbury Constitution, to a large extent, as you have very correctly pointed out, was a pretty good constitution, right?
Yeah.
And it takes into account many of the problems that we now have, and it actually addressed them at that time in a way even before they came up. It prevented them.
Yeah.
But still, something was at work that was able to subvert the objectives of the constitution and get us into the mess that we are in today. So going
100%
forward,
agree.
let's say, no, don't worry about commenting on that now. What I'm just telling you is we have to address that. In our
Yeah.
document has to identify and address that thing and make sure that that thing is under control. Otherwise, it will come up again after all our hard work and make it worth nothing.
Absolutely
Can
right,
I add
Nirmalan.
one
Please,
more?
please do correct in the proper document, because then you will see the whole thing, and then we'll be able to take it forward from there.
Can I add my comment with regard to Ram, whatever, and then
The
Nirmalan's?
Nirmalan, yes.
Yeah. basically, you know, 48 Salisbury Constitution, Article 29 gave all that protection for I mean, I don't even use the word minorities, right? And they did all that, but having had all that, also they did all those mischievous things. Remember, Article 29 2 says if they enact such laws will be void. Let me see, I have the constitution with me. Let me 48 Constitution. Let me read that, please. Article 29, right? Now say, actually, it says, you know,
It is 2C.
2C, yeah, but it says all such laws will be void, you know, will be null and void. So similarly, so these are the things, Ram, you know, we will have to introduce even in the constitution where we propose amendments, right? Actually, any democrat, now see in Germany, Article 21 says you can't introduce a single law if in case there is a touch of undemocratic rule, right? So naturally, these are good, I mean, ideas. We can follow the same thing. We need to, you know, include such provisions in our constitution also in the future. So if those things could be done, you know, I mean, definitely we should be able to make a country better than this.
Yeah, Lacille, Preeti also has raised a hand.
Yeah,
Yes.
please let Preeti come on.
Yes, Preeti.
Yeah, just a quick one on what we've been talking. At the present moment now, when we talk about the past and the Salisbury Commission and their recommendations and the system we had, we must also not forget the fact that we never had those independent commissions at that time in appointing the upper house or the Senate. So the majoritarianism prevailed. And therefore, whoever who won the majority in the lower house also, because they had the power to appoint an X number of people into the Senate, their majority prevailed. But this is where we have a chance of correcting that and refining it through our independent commissions, where we can make the appointment balanced. Because what is happening today and has happened in the recent past also, it has been the rule of the parliamentarians or the politicians for the politicians and by the politicians. It's not the rule for the people, by the people and of the people. So that is what we need to correct. And I think we have a very good opening through the independent commissions, provided the role of the independent commissions are properly and clearly set out as a part of into the constitution.
Preeti, I like to add one more. Preeti, can I add one more, please?
Go ahead, please.
Actually, Preeti, now our constitution in 1948 was drafted again, you know, with, I mean, people like so many in the sense, they say the then cabinet, you know, Secretary one, Mr. Pires, and also under the guidance of Sir Ivor Jennings, right? So actually, when in most of the documents, books and all that, it says, we got three special things in the Salisbury Constitution, particularly. Those were, you know, you mentioned that there were no commissions really. Actually, we had two commissions there, Public Services Commission and Judicial Services Commission, and also the Senate. Those three were the unique features given to us, right? Long before this concept of commissions were introduced in such a way, right? So these two commissions ensured now up to 72, public sector was super efficient, I would say, a lot better than what it is now, right? Now, generally, all the appointments, transfers, promotions, disciplinary actions were handled by the Public Services Commission. That is the same thing with regard to the Judiciary Services Commission also. Appointments, promotions, transfers, disciplinary matters were all handled by the Judicial Services Commission. So naturally, we had a taste of it even then. But unfortunate situation, having politicized, the purpose of the commissions were not, I mean, we didn't really get a feel of it, I mean, get the best out of it, basically. Sorry.
Thanks, Lacille. I think the time is going on. Shall I go to the next pillar?
Please, yes.
Yeah, because then we can discuss again. Maybe if we need a lot more discussion, we can have another day as well.
Yes.
So
Yes,
let's
yes.
go for the independence of judiciary.
Yeah. Actually, the independence of the judiciary is the most important thing in a country to establish rule of law. And for that purpose, independence need to be whatever said done in India, the collegium or whatever you call it, appointments are made by that special body. So in our country, all what they do, manipulated. Now see, in 1978, for the first time, they brought a chief justice from outside, Neville Samarakon. But having been appointed, he rose up to the whatever dignity of the office and having understood the responsibilities. He didn't want to carry out the instructions of the then president, right? He stood up. Unfortunately, the judiciary was tampered with always, because I totally object this system of granting pardon by the president. That is interference with the judiciary, I personally believe. The other thing is, appointments. They are very particular. Now, even Mahinda Rajapaksa, certain court orders he never implemented. That is wrong. Ranil Wickremesinghe, now with regard to even these local government elections, I mean, completely disregarded. That can't happen. Judiciary should be able to give any verdict, and if that is the case, it applies to even like in other countries where it is to the president or the prime minister. If they have broken the law, if there's a judicial order, that should be carried out, and that should be the atmosphere we should create. So what I personally think is, the biggest problem is, the Constitutional Council, there now, now most of them are politicians. Only 3 are from the independent whatever, but they are also political stooges, I would say. Now see, that's why Anula Vijayasundara stood up in order to support the appointment of the IGP. So these things can't happen that way. The Constitutional Council must also be 100% independent, and the atmosphere needs to be created. We have done that in our proposal, where we will definitely, go on the basis of merit, and at the same time, we have to basically evaluate the track record. Now, see, it is possible. Now, even with regard to the IGP, there is enough and more instances where, you can probably decide whether he should be considered or not. What happens? Even in parliament, there are criminals in holding office, even in the public sector, because the president, all of them, right, they push through people whom they want in order to achieve their personal goals. No, it's the country, it's a nation, and it's for the people. These things can't be tolerated. It has to be completely rejected in the future.
The rule of law.
Yeah, now the rule of law is a very important thing for that matter. I would say, actually, what is rule of law? It's a set of principles, right? Which ensures a free and a just society, for that matter. So what I am trying to say, in order to create, there are so many other preconditions that we need to sort of clean up, fix up. So if there's a possible rule of law, its equity and the transparency, accountability in its applications are paramount to ensuring good governance, cutting across all spheres of governance, and to ensure that the doctrine of public trust is not violated. So these are the things that needs to be done. The legal process should be digitized. All that needs to be done. Special courts shall be established to tackle bribery and corruption and take timely action. Actually, the biggest problem in this country, I have another book. I don't know if I have it here. The biggest problem in this country, justice deficit system disorder. Basil Fernando, he had written a lot. So naturally, if we correct this justice deficit system disorder, I think everything will be in place. That is for that purpose we need to sort of get together and push through, together, so that we can definitely create all those conditions. If we do that, we will be doing justice for future generations. If we don't do it now, I think we'll be also failing, and we will be neglecting our duty too.
Any short questions on that at the moment? So then we can move to the next one. Anybody with questions at the moment? So, no, we can move for the next one. Nobody's raised the hand. So let's go to the next pillar and then go. The executive is the next question. So there are lots of things that talk about, but maybe I put all the items there so you can summarize.
Actually, I would like to say the executive in two different ways. Now whatever the policies that have been earmarked or proposed or suggested, the execution part lies with the executive. Unfortunately, now the executive has been overburdened with too many things, having created a president who is mighty, the god. This should be changed. Actually, all five pillars should be independently functioning. Nobody is above the other. That should be the principle always, and ensure there should be no power vacuum at all at any stage, right? uh, now the parliament for all purposes. Now I remember somebody, what is this, Ram said cabinet is not accountable. No, cabinet is accountable, but the concept of accountability is not in practice today. Article 42 of the constitution specifically says cabinet is accountable. In other countries there are cabinet ministers who have been thrown out, but to a great extent now we should be grateful with these young boys who really fought hard with regard to this health issue, failures. I mean, maximum destruction in the health sector by one single minister over a period of time. Again, even during bankruptcy, what I would say, what did Parliament do? Can the Parliament support a kind of a person who against whom there were so many allegations, but very, 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 I mean, really frustrating, I would say. They supported and ensured that the no confidence motion is defeated. That can't ever happen in parliament. That is a disgrace for parliament. So naturally, in a parliament, in a country where those things happen against the wishes of the people, this needs to be corrected. Unfortunate situation back again is still the president. I mean, look at President or even Mahinda Rajapaksa. Now this is something really. I mean, I can't believe now. There was a professor Ranjit Bandara who was the chair in the COPE, right? And there was evidence that he was supporting the cricket board, which was, I mean, there's a court case also. Let's see. But unfortunate situation, they used their political power in a manner which is highly unethical. This can't happen. So there is again a person like Rohita Begunodana appointed the chair of the COPE. This can't happen. If I may say, now in the past there was Susai Dasan who was a chartered accountant, right? Like that, people of that caliber. So it has come down to that level, low level. It's a disgrace, even to us, because it's a disgrace. It can't happen. So Parliament is a highly politicized institution. Actually, it's a political institution. How do we do that? We could do that if we can send people who understands the functioning of parliament better, and also we need training. I mean, institutions also, so that they could be even trained how to deliver or how to function in those positions. There's another important thing here we discussed today, Preeti and myself. Basically, in America in 1880s, if I remember right, actually they had an experience because they fought a war with British first and they wanted independence, right? During that period, actually, like here, what is happening now, all that they went through in 1776 up to 1776. So they thought of all that, and they introduced the what is this Posse Comitatus. ඒකේ කියන්නේ හමුදාවන් කවදාකවත් සිවිල් සමාජය control කරන්න දාන්න බෑ. So we recommended, I discussed the matter with Preeti, and we also had added here, armed forces should not be deployed to handle civil whatever activities. Armed forces are there if in case there's a threat, whether it is internally or externally. Now they are using armed forces to deal with protest, which is completely wrong, and that has been the tradition even in Sri Lanka. I know that basically even in other countries. Now these things need to be straightened as well. The use of the armed forces as a domestic police force for civilian law enforcement shall not be permitted, except when expressly whatever authorized by law. So these are things that we need to change. And if you change all those things, we will be definitely upgrading the citizen to a higher level.
Shall we go for the next one and then have a Q&A?
Please go ahead, Chula.
So the independent commission.
Yeah, actually, independent commissions are a modern invention to a great extent. But like what I told you in 47 or 48 with the Salisbury Constitution, also we had 2 independent commissions. And those 2 commissions were functioning extremely well. So naturally, we had the little experience, but unfortunate situation is they abolished in 72 Constitution, took the powers and handed all the powers of recruitment, promotion, transfers to the cabinet of ministers and the politicians. Owing to that, every public sector institutions, peons, everybody recruited by the politicians, which is wrong. This system needs to be completely done away with, stopped. So independent commissions are independently given permission, established to do a kind of better service in the sense to strengthen democracy. Look at what happened in 2019 when there was a question about Gota's citizenship, right? And even Mahinda, what it is, Mahinda Rishapriya said he has got a certificate from the party that he's a citizen. Is that okay? So these are little questions. Independent commissions have to be totally independent for the benefit of the people, for the benefit of the country, for the benefit of the nation. These things have not happened. Actually, even SLEDA has given, Sri Lanka Institute of Development Administration, has conducted various courses with regard to governance. Even in those discussions, these matters have been discussed. At the same time, right, what is important, most of the problems that are there in the public sector, because at the time we joined the public sector, there were rules, regulations printed. Now, even with regard to these commissions, it is sad, none of these commissions have framed their own regulations about how to run those institutions. So what we need to do is to ensure that regulations are made, submitted to Parliament, they are gazetted and made public. So if you have all those things, then they will never be able to manipulate all that in the way that they are doing now. Actually, the politicians also don't want all those things done because they are trying to create maximum possible say opportunities for them to maybe to rob or do irregular things. So this can't be allowed, and they have to be printed and in the form of regulations. It has to be gazetted, published, all that. So they can't do all these hanky-panky, like what is happening right now.
Lacille,
Now,
Preeti has raised hand.
Okay, yeah, please. Preeti?
Thank you. Thank you, Lacille, for your excellent presentation.
No problem.
And
Thanks.
very clear. And also, what has been put on the screen is also easy to follow. Now, my thing about the independent commissions, which is extremely important because that's the new initiative. And that is where we are able to checkmate or check and balance the other powers. we need to lay more emphasis on this. And perhaps at the very beginning, at the top, one could say the roles of the independent commissions in brief. So, Paron, that would be very useful so that later on
Yeah.
it could follow through on that basis. Secondly, we need to also clarify as to who appoints the independent commissions, because that appointment also needs to be made very independently, not necessarily through a politician, if possible, because that's where we can have the true independence of association. Just 2 points, just to ponder about it, and
Yeah.
let's see as we move along.
Yes, Preeti, even that is going to be streamlined in a different way. I would say now, see, Constitutional Council has a secretariat, right? And those are independent officials who will be permanently there. And they are also being given guidelines as to how to do all that. It has to be like what we discussed, printed, published, gazetted, approved by Parliament, all that, So naturally, those appointments will be based on meritocracy because we will be given what happened in Singapore, MPH meritocracy, honesty, and pragmatism. All that is needed here in this country. Also, if you do all that, I think we can even outdo Singapore, without any problem because we have specialists in even overseas. Our people, I know, basically, so we can even invite them or do whatever. Actually, make use of all those good brains and put the whole country on track. Now, actually, they did in 1776 in America. What they said was we have to put the foundation so that it will go on for another 200 years. But we should insist we should lay the foundation so it will go on for another 500 years, and it should not be there should not be room left for crooked politicians to manipulate. That could be done. Preeti, it could be done.
Lacille, I think what you say is right. I mean, we can develop a very, very consensus document
Yeah.
and then make it as a foundation. We'll be able to build something. So what I suggest is now today we've taken nearly 2 hours
Yeah.
that we
Shall I
circulate
also
this
talk
document
about? Shall
and
I
then
also add a little more about these officers of Parliament, Chula?
yeah. So we can talk about it in a minute. What I'm suggesting is that we might have to do another session.
Please.
Yeah. So yes, go ahead with the officers of
Now,
Parliament.
actually, at the moment, officers of the Parliament are the Secretary General of Parliament, Auditor General, and that's about all. So now, what we need to do now, all these officers we have listed here should be officers of the Parliament because they help the Parliament to run an effective government and a clean government. So now Attorney General is a very important official, a key official in the system. He is also duty bound to ensure rule of law. But what happens? He's under pressure. He is subject to various kinds of whatever, and he does not do the right thing. Look at legal draftsman. He is not a parliamentary officer. So what we want to do is parliamentary officers are those officers who directly help the parliament to do a clean job, efficient job, a democratic job. So naturally, we have listed out so many. All these officials will be treated as parliamentary officials. They'll be directly answerable to parliament because now at the moment, legal draftsman is under Minister of Justice. If he wants to draft it, if he wants the draft done in somewhere else, actually legal draftsman comes forward with it and say, okay, this is the draft. That should not be the way. Legal draftsman can't abdicate, or he has to do his job. Inspector General of Police is another one. He has to do his job and answerable to Parliament. So once you correct these situations here and look at the Treasury Secretary, right? You can't. The governor or the central bank, totally independent. He's directly answerable to the Parliament. And if you do that, I think this country could be run better. And I think we will be teaching a lesson to the whole world because even other democracies, even in UK, they are under pressure in so many ways. If you do this kind of things, I think definitely, they might really open their eyes whether, this is the system, how to sort of improve even in those countries, you know.
Yes, Ram has raised his hand.
Please,
Ra-
I
Ram,
could
yes,
hear.
Ram.
I could hear
Hello?
Chula.
Yeah, Ram has raised the hand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can he ask the question?
This
Yeah.
the Lacille was going on and on telling how the parliament failed the country. All right.
Yeah.
So it is not really the president who failed the country. It is a parliament that failed the country.
Together.
Because
Because
whether it is the executive prime minister or executive president, all these laws were passed by the parliament. So how do we put the blame on the president? Because if the parliament did not approve this, if the parliament did not remove Kehelia Rambutpala, if the parliament did not indict Shirani Bandaranayak, so every wrong thing was sealed by the parliament. Why?
okay.
Why parliament sealed it?
So
Because
who is
parliament was acting in connivance with the executive. Even
definitely?
the
That's what I'm.
independent commission members, the constitutional council members, independent members, they are being coerced by the twin power the ministers and the parliament has in forming the legislature as well as executing. So the fundamental problem is whether it is an executive president or an executive prime minister, all these laws would have been passed without any doubt. So, by making an executive, instead of executive president, having an executive prime minister is not going to make a difference. Lacille asked
I
me a
don't.
question last time. What
Yeah.
system we follow? And Lacille himself gave me the answer at this session. He said, US put out a constitution which lasted for 270 odd years and still is a powerful country. That country, when they adopted that constitution, was in a mess. But they rose because the principle is they did not give the power to legislate to the executive as well. They separate it out. So all the officers and independent commissions will be reporting to the parliament, the legislature. The legislature will supervise the executive who is completely independent. That is how the US system works. So Lacille gave the answer, and I don't know why he is not following it.
Can I come out now? Can I speak?
Yeah, sure.
Right. You know, US system, I also appreciate that it is very strong, right? Now, in our system, who is the party leader or who is the chief executive? You know, I mean, in the present, I'm sorry, not the party leader. Who is the chief executive officer in our country? Actually, president is the chief executive officer, right? He's the head of state. He has all the power, right? He has all the powers. Unfortunately, he's above law, right? In America, it is not the case. Look at what happened. I said with reasons in 1776. They spoke of the need to have a strong constitution. They did that. Now, in America, in 1880s again, they introduced the slavery, banned slavery by constitutional amendment 15, right? And they gave voting rights by the 16th amendment, right? What happened? Even in America, they had the similar problems. Then they assassinated a guy called Booth, assassinated Abraham Lincoln, right? They said, no, you can't. We are white supreme majority, and we should be able to be reign. There should not be slaves coming working together with us. So similarly, in this country also the same problems are there. Even in America it was there. Even now there are problems. So, but unfortunate situation is in our country, politicians had more power than in America, right? So now in the Westminster system, Ram, you can't appoint every Dick, Tom, and Harry like Rohita Begunawardena or so many you name, right? It had happened. So naturally, the parliament has been devalued to that extent from 1978 onwards. But I am trying to say, if the parliament did not do their job, yes, parliament is at fault. But parliament was ultimately brought down to that level by whom? Because the party leader, who was the president at that time, whether it is Mahinda Rajapaksa or Jaya Jayawardena. Now, I told you even at the very beginning, Jaya Jayawardena, in his own words, he didn't mince his words. He said, I don't want to listen to the whims and fancies of the elected legislature. Can you agree? Do you approve? We want a parliament which is independent. We are talking about a parliament which is independent, where there will be, good laws, and that will be whether upheld or whatever, checked in and then approved, right? So naturally, we are introducing systems, having seen where the deficiencies were. Ram?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Lacille, we are looking at what a nonsensical constitution we have now and the presidential
Agreed.
position of that. We are not looking at a new constitution where the checks and balances will be imposed and still we have the separation of powers. We are going just by the label president, not by what it should have been, not we are going by what it has been. We given different name, doesn't matter if that is required.
No.
But we have
Ram.
seen how it works well in US. It is the party president because of the fact that the president cannot be in term for more than 2 terms, makes he cannot be a life party president.
But
So
18th Amendment granted. Luckily, the 19th Amendment repealed it,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It has the way the constitution is right now in US. It is much better than, as you yourself said, even the Westminster system in UK is under threat.
It is because there is rule of law in that country. But even then, even at the moment, what is Trump doing? I mean, he's trying to sort of weaken the judiciary, weaken the public sector, the executive, all that, right? But unfortunately, we became victims in the hands of those corrupt leaders here in Sri Lanka. So we are trying to change it.
Ram, I think you also have a very good understanding about the past and what has happened. So I welcome for you to comment on the document so that you see the whole document, suggest any
Yeah.
new paths and so on, so we can improve it. That's the whole idea of this discussion. So
Great.
Ranjan, you have raised the hand as well, Ranjan. Ranjan?
Ranjan, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's muted still. Ranjan, I can't see you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Lacille, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ranjan.
Yeah. Lacille, I said I thanked you. It was a very interesting and interesting and very educative and enlightening presentation. I learned a lot. So I thank you very much for it. And I'm very grateful to you for that. I have 5 points to make. First is, I'm looking at the entirety of your presentation. Now, with regard to the perpetuation of political dynasties, I was reminded of the American method of how they avoid it. They have the primaries. Each
Yeah.
party, the Republicans and the Democrats, they have their primaries and allow the people, their supporters themselves, the supporters at the grassroots level to select
Yeah.
who their candidates will be, which
Great. You
means the
are,
party leader does not, you know, select his wife and his daughter or the son. You see, that corruption is not there. It's very practical. Only thing, it's a
yeah.
little expensive, but I think it is worth it. That's one.
Finished.
Two, abolition of the executive presidency.
Yeah.
Uh, it is quite fashionable nowadays, to go along with the proposal to abolish. I was wondering whether we have really gone into this matter in sufficient depth. In other words, we were under the Westminster system. Now we want to go back to the Westminster system. I'm wondering whether we really studied our performance under the Westminster system for 30 years, from 48 to 78. I think countries' disintegration began under the Westminster system. There is room for. I can't go into all details now. That means I'll have to spend another hour. So I'll just stop there. I think we should revisit this uh, populist proposal, to revert to the Westminster system. That's true. You see, I might also mention in Sri Lanka, it reminds me of a saying, which is very popular in France. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Point three, the use of the armed forces for police duties, you are absolutely right. Even when I was in the army, you see, I became a very unpopular person because I said the armed forces should not be used for police duties. And they didn't go. It did not go down well with me, quite well with the establishment, for very good reason. About a few years ago, now the Mao
Yeah.
guerrillas in India are very strong, unlike see, and they overran an army post. Actually, it's not exactly an army. In India, there is a force between the police and the army. The, uh, I, the, they overran this and killed almost everyone in that camp,
Yeah.
which shocked the whole of India, and and the people wanted to know why the government is not deploying the armed forces against the Mao guerrillas. At that point, the service commanders of India came forward and said the armed forces are far too lethal an instrument to be used against our own people and advised the government against it.
Yeah.
See, now the beauty is this. In India, the Indian leadership has the wisdom and they were statesmen enough to accept that advice. In Sri Lanka, that army commander would have been kicked out. Who gave
You
that
are right. Yeah.
kick? That is Sri Lanka. That is the difference between India and Sri Lanka.
I
That's
salute
fine.
you.
Then the Sri Lanka, uh, see, Lacille, another point. I come to my fourth point. The Sri Lankan executive president, you see, he is a creature very much of the parliament. I don't think he has all the powers. I don't think he has all the powers that the US president has. There is a big difference. The US president is powerful. He takes decisions, and for 8 years, he is the powerful man and he leaves. In Sri Lanka, now take Ranil Wickremesinghe. If 135, if a majority of MPs in parliament decides we don't want him, he goes. So he is completely at the mercy of, and at the mercy of the majority of MPs in Parliament. And I might also say this: you see, the majority of MPs in Parliament have a sort of Damocles over their neck, over their heads. You see, they elected him president not because they love the people of Sri Lanka, but because they wanted to save their own skins.
You're right.
Because they wanted to save their own skins. That is why they made him the president. So let us see what will happen when after the presidential election. If those 120, if the majority of the present MPs in Parliament are kicked out, well, you know, it will be you can guess the code of ethics for politics, code of ethics for politicians. Lacille, I think Sri Lanka, taking into consideration Sri Lanka's context, Sri Lanka's ethos, Sri Lanka's ethics, see, a code of ethics for politicians in Sri Lanka, which is legally enforceable, is an absolute necessity. A legally enforceable code of ethics. Thank you very much. I stop there.
Very good, very good. Some very good questions. Actually, I like to start with the first question you raised with regard to this revisiting Salisbury Constitution, right? Now, in 1931, we got voting rights. Having got voting rights, actually, we established the State Council. You know, though there was no constitution as such with, you know, a lot of powers to the Sri Lankan whatever leaders. I mean, it was a trial period. It was a training period to upgrade it with independence thereafter, right? Now, even during the period from 1931 to 47, there were a lot of good things done. Actually, during that period, to say it this way, you know, we had a lot of problems, malnutrition, and you know, in 1931, with regard to education, CWW Kanangara minister had said, education was something really for the rich, right? It was not there for the poor. So what happened now, during that period, they started strengthening the citizens, and independent, whatever free education was introduced prior to independence in 1943, right? So having given free education, CWW Kanankara in Parliament had said in 1901 there were 650,000 students school going, say 5 to 15, but only 1/4 of the population had got education. So after having given free education, introduced free education, he had said, I have made something which was very costly, very expensive, very cheap, and in abundance, right? He had said, now everybody can get education. You know, that way schools are there every 2 miles, primary school every 5 miles, Mahavidyalaya, and selected townships, central colleges. Like that, they were bringing it forward. Now, after independence, our leaders, what they did was they strengthened the whole thing a lot more. Now, look at marketing department in 1945. It was established, right? It made, I mean, arrangements to buy everything from the farmers, right? They developed a system through the cooperative system. There were about 10,000 odd cooperatives all over the island, right? So the system was so very effective, and even the costs were so low because they had the monopoly of importing various things like salmon, this, that, and all that, right? So actually, that was the machinery they had. Only thing they had to improve with regard to other things, other areas, you know, holding elections and all that by our own people. Let me say, actually, we have to revisit, and we have revisited. Salisbury system is a governance model, and they had said they are giving it to Sri Lanka because, you know, like what It says in the report, to be specific, page 119 of the Soul report says why they want to give us this governance system, because they have tested, proved, and they have found it very effective to strengthen a democratic government, right? And that was, they said, from 1215, from Magna Carta. So like that was in 1215. I mean, we got independence in 1948. So what it's about 6 centuries. So what I'm trying to say, I mean, there was enough reasons, and we have we have revisited. And you said US president is more powerful. No, our president is more powerful. You spoke about the impeachment. Actually, though you can impeach, you can never push through an impeachment, because first stage you have to have 2/3 of signatures, right? After that, once it is passed, it has to go to the judiciary, and judiciary, which way they would decide, you don't know. So naturally, those checks and balances they have at least shown, but nothing is possible, right? That's the way it goes. And then impeachment, code of ethics. Look at America, look at India, look at England. In most of those countries now, categorically in America, in UK, even ministers have a code of ethics, right? How they should perform in the cabinet, and if they do anything irregular against all that, they'll be dealt with. But here, nothing of the sort is happening. So naturally, and you said Roos, what it is, American president takes decisions. He can't, now there are instances, he can't take decisions like the way our president is doing. I like to quote one instance where, I told you about this, what happened to Abraham Lincoln. He was assassinated, right? But in 19 early 1900s, say, I can't remember when Roosevelt was the president, the son, not the senior, there was a coal mine strike. Even at that time, having given them equality, all those, by constitutional amendments, there was a problem. They were grumbling about not giving, equal status with regard to various other things, 8-hour work and all that, right? So this matter could not be settled by them. And what happened? Ultimately, Roosevelt had said, I want to speak to the strikers, the black, then the ministers, the parliament objected, no, that is not your job. But he said, no, I have to do it because this is a national crisis. They are on strike, people are suffering, no coal, people are no heating or whatever, So what did ultimately Roosevelt do? Though it was not there in the constitution, he had said, after having discussed, give them all those things, what is wanted, what they have requested, equal treatment, 8-hour shift, all that, So likewise, he had said, though it is not my job, you all couldn't solve it, I have solved it, now do it accordingly. So there are problems this way, that way. Our president is not that. He can't be even impeached. He can't be dealt with by the court, because there's impunity, I mean the immunity. So these are problems. These things need to be removed. Actually, our president is, I think, the most powerful president in the world is our president. Ranjan, this is my understanding, and that's based on reasons.
Lacille, there are two people who's raised hands, Anura and then Preeti. Can I propose at this time, is 24th you are available? We can arrange the next meeting on 24th. That is in 2 weeks' time.
Okay.
Because we can circulate this document, get the feedback, corrections in other inputs, and then
can we answer also, Chula, these two, because it might not take too long, so that's done. Then.
So Anura, please, sorry for the delay. We were waiting. Anura?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Chula. Hi, Lacille. Long time no see, and I really commend your perseverance, not giving up. We all need change, and I see you fighting continuously. But unfortunately, I have lots of disagreements in what you're presenting, unfortunately. but I don't have enough time to address all of them. But I just want to pinpoint a couple of items because you keep on saying independent this and independent that, and I'm really concerned how we need to discuss how we should create this independence in people, in governance, and in our representatives. So that's, I don't think we can do that overnight, but this is something when we prepare this document that we need to seriously think about how we can ensure the independence. Like many of the other speakers, I too disagree. Going back to the training diapers, I call it, for the Salisbury Constitution. At that time, it was like training diapers that the Suddas gave us to get used to democracy, and that's not where we should go back to. We need to go forward in strengthening, especially strengthening the rights of the people. I think one of the fundamental things that most of the dysfunctions that we have in governance and in other activities is because the people do not have the independence to stand up, and their rights have actually been seriously violated. Today, I don't think I can be very critical in public. So it has gone to that level where where people's rights have been really violated. So we lack individual liberty, and I think that's very fundamental as human beings. We can either be slaves or we can be free, and it's very important that we develop an environment where people can be free. And when I say people, everybody, every citizen, not an exclusive class, not an elite group, not political club, or I call them a cult. But we need to figure out a method where we can make every citizen, born and unborn, to be able to remain independent and at the same time free in their thinking. So just a couple of points to mention. When we prepare these documents, we need to seriously look at the accountability to the people. For the government to be accountable to people needs to be stronger. The constitution should be made for the people, and the government should be made to ensure the constitution is obeyed. Number two is, in order to do that, it's very important that we limit powers. For example, if you're going to talk about five branches of government, okay, but I have a lot of issues in that proposal, but let's say it's five. That five, the total sum of that five should be less powerful than the 22 million people. Right. So that's a philosophical thinking. So the power in the people should be stronger than the power of those branches of government. Right. The other idea is rule of law should be based upon the individual liberty and private property rights of every individual citizen. So I don't want, those are three fundamental things that I hope we can discuss. And Chula, if you're going to have continuity of this dialogue, I think if we can break down what Lacille is proposing, and so that we can concentrate. Okay, we don't need to go back to what is happening. We all know the problems. We don't need to be discussing about what is really happening, but let's discuss about some solutions that we can all agree upon, so that we can find answers rather than
what I will propose is, Anura, thanks for bringing that up, and also about the weaknesses. So the what we need is input from you. So what I will do is I will circulate this draft document within 2 days or something, and then you probably got a week or something for me to send back with new ideas and so on. So we can highlight those areas and discuss those, because people will have a background as to what the whole document is, and then we will able to develop on that, so that then we can finalize it. To we will not be ever perfect, but we can get clean as much as possible and acceptable to as many, and then take it forward, because we are in a critical time in Sri Lanka at the moment, so we really need to do that. Yeah, thanks for the input over there. And
Yeah.
Preeti, yes, Preeti.
Yeah, thank you. Just a moment. Thank you, Chula. Yeah, just because we need to also understand the different perspectives and the different aspects of what is being proposed, and what we need to, how we need to go forward and to improve on what we have to do. So let me give a couple of things about the past very briefly, and what we may need to look at, so that the next time around when we meet, we will be better prepared. Number one, I mean about the executive presidency. The very architect of the executive presidency himself, Mr. J.R. Javadana, is on record of saying that the only thing that the executive presidency of Sri Lanka cannot do is to make a man a woman. Such was the power, such is the power. Number one. Number two, we all know that once elected, right, the representatives of the people, for the people, by the people, we have no control. It just goes on. So the only way we can give the supremacy and the sovereignty of the people is to have the right checks and balances. And that is what is being proposed by the different pillars. So that's number two. The other example I can give is, take India. It's a country of 1.4 billion people, 34 or more states and union territories, about thousands of dialects, but held together by an executive premiership. They don't have an executive presidency. And they have a Senate that is which is called Rajya Sabha. From the Lok Sabha, which is the normal assembly, and they have the Rajya Sabha, which gives that check and balance. They don't have the executive presidency, but they have a ceremonial president who signs off and who appoints, who does all of that. So that has worked for a country which is now becoming the fourth largest economy in the world, overtaking UK, France, and very soon Germany. So let's look at it from the point of view of what has worked and what has not worked. And comparing like with like, we are looking at Asian democracies. All of the Asian democracies, South Asian particularly, do not have this executive presidency. It started in 78, and we know, I mean, we have to talk with experience what we have gone through. So what we are trying to do, what Lacille has tried to present, is the checks and balances. Every human being, in my opinion, is fallible. Every man or woman has a price. We cannot depend on a person, but we can depend on a system. So this is where we need to concentrate our efforts on. So let's take this forward. I mean, I know there are some others who presented a different viewpoint. Fantastic. We can learn from it. So please say, what is it? And what do you propose instead? That's what should be done at the next meeting.
Yeah,
But I must
that's
also say that this is very crucial, extremely crucial. This is what the Aravalli wanted. Change the system, not the people alone. Systems change. So we have to do it. It's a matter for our future and for generations to come. So I'm glad that we have a few people who are extremely able, who are very knowledgeable, and they can, I'm sure, contribute. So let's keep this open, but let them also please take into account the large picture, the different aspects, and go on the basis of evidence. It has to be evidence-based. Our policies must be evidence-based. India's constitution in 51 done by Ambedkar still stands. How many constitutional changes have they had? Tell me. So we have had 21 already since 78. So these are the issues. Let's reflect on it when we go and meet the next time. Thank you very much for giving me time.
Thank you,
Back
Preeti,
to
for all
Lacille.
those comments. And Lacille,
Mula,
yeah, yeah,
can I add a word to Anurag?
yes, please, yeah.
Actually, Anurag wanted, freedom, liberty, all that. Actually, in order to achieve all that, we have to create a country where they adhere to or honor the constitution, because in the constitution all that has been said to make a in a present constitution dharmishta country, represented democracy, supremacy of the law, all that, but nothing happens. Why? I like to quote one instance in 1956. That was Desmond de Silva, if I remember right, or IGP. When there was a strike, right? Bandar Naik, as usual, he had said, go and stop that strike. That IGP had the backbone to say, no, that's not my job. They have a right to protest, right? So ultimately, Bandar Naik dealt with him. So what I am trying to say, our leaders were like that. Now, if it was the case in a country where there is rule of law, where the law is supreme, that prime minister will be dealt with, right? So we need a country in order to ensure freedom of people, recognition and respect for people, all that. And all what we need is to ensure that we implement the constitution according to the law, to the rule, to the back. I mean, in its to the whatever. So naturally, that is what we are talking right now in a country where there is no rule of law, where there is no respect for law, where there is no respect for people, all because the politicians don't know their limits. We want a limited government. We talk about limited governance because we see all that in other countries. Even in America, to a great extent, it is a limited government. So this is basically what we are thinking of, Anurag. If there's any questions, we will talk about it.
Yeah, if I can steal a minute, please. It's very easy to blame the politicians. It's very easy to blame other people. I think the problem is us. We have surrendered. We have surrendered our powers, and basically, we as individual citizens have lost our powers. So having a constitution, let's have another constitution. We can have another constitution. Nothing happens if the people don't have their rights protected and strengthened. Go ahead.
No. Now see, in India, they had bigger problems. But Ambedkar said, right, the constitution, how it has to be, after all, respected and adhered. They have given everything. I think we should discuss about the Indian constitution on a different date, because it has everything. People's rights, independence of judiciary, Article 50 of the Indian constitution says you can never touch it. So similarly, once you implement, once you establish those things, basically, there's a situation where you are bound to honor. If you don't do that, you will be dealt with by the law. Now see, even in England, right? Who is this guy? The man who, what is this? Prime Minister. During COVID days, he had a party in Downing Street, number 10.
Johnson, Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson.
Right. Unfortunately, what happened to him? The police say, no, this is not the case. You have had a party, and he had to resign. So in our country, it is not the case. Actually, the officials, public officials. Now, Ranjan also, I'm very happy. You had fought and you had tried to tell the rulers actually that they can't deploy armed personnel for civil activities. So these are the types of things that has happened here in this country. We need to create a strong public sector, and for that purpose there are other things that needs to be done. Once you do that, when you have a judiciary which is strong, which will never bow down to political pressure, and they can't do that. Even in our constitution, it says interference with judiciary is an offense. But I mean, who has been punished? A single politician? No. So these things can't happen, you know. So you need to create the atmosphere by creating a country where there is rule of law. When you do that, everybody, whoever who breaks the law, will be dealt with. But I'm trying to say now, even these days, you know, some minister says, එම පිටරටින් ආවත් මං කියන්නේ මම කරනවා මේක. හරිද? එහෙම කියනව නම් එහෙම කියන එකම වැරදි, because that is not his job to pressurize the IGP, you know. So these are things, they have their limits. Unfortunately, in this country, politicians think that they are all powerful. So these things need to be changed. Thinking needs to be changed. Politicians need to be taught how to, you know, work with restraint and all that, you know. So once you do that within a very short period, I think within about 5-10 years, you can discipline this country without any problem. Lee Kuan Yew did that, you know.
Thank you, Lacille. I think we've gone 2.5 hours. We never do that, but anyway, today it's a long day for us. So I'm glad that we had so much input, and also there are people with historical experience, a lot of good knowledge about the subject, and suggesting things that need to be included in this final documentation. So maybe it will probably take 2 days for me to get the document sorted out again to the next draft, and then circulate it to everybody, and then get a feedback. And if we can meet again in 2 weeks' time, that will be good. 24th, if possible.
And thank you for the opportunity, Chula. It's a great thing that you are committedly, you know, doing this kind of things. And fortunately, ultimately, we have got together. We'll see.
Yeah, thank you, Lacille, for all that input and everything else. Let's
And
go
thank you.
forward from here. Yeah. So let's meet again, and thank you, everybody. I mean, you all have contributed and so on. Okay,
Thank
great.
you so
Have a
much.
good night. Yeah. And good morning
Night,
to
Good
some of you as
night.
well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.